The board will now come to order. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Cone. Alderman Ryan. Alderman Balmer. Alderwoman Velazquez. Alderwoman Sanye. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Browning. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Aldridge. President Green.
Present.
Alderman Cone. Alderman Balmer. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderwoman Tyus. 12 present. You have quorum.
A quorum being present, we will dispense with line item 2, 3, and 4. So, introduction of honored guests. Any introduction of honored guests? Alderwoman from the 11th.
Testing, testing. Good morning, Madam President and members of the board. I would like to have as my honored guest today, Budweiser's Guns and Hoses. I'd like to acknowledge and thank the 911 dispatchers for their service. The National Public Safety Communications Week is this week. So I'd just like to acknowledge them and once again, thank them for their service to our city. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further introduction of honored guests? And it looks like our virtual component is down at the moment. Is that being worked on? Okay, it looks like we're signing back in.
In the meeting now.
Okay, we got it. Approval of the minutes.
We have none.
Report of city officials.
Report of city officials can be found in A, B, and C of the agenda and has been placed in the Google Drive for your review.
We have no bills on our informal calendar. First reading of board bills.
We have none.
Reference to committee of board bills.
We have none.
Second reading report of standing committees.
We have none.
Report of special committees.
We have none.
Perfection consent calendar.
We have none.
Board bills for perfection.
We have none.
Report of engrossment.
We have none.
Third reading and final passage of board bills consent.
We have none.
Third reading and final passage of board bills.
We have none.
Report of finally passed and signed by the president.
We have none.
We can dispense with line items 8 through 19. First reading of resolutions and reference to committee.
Resolution 1, sponsored by President Green and Alderman Cone. The Board of Aldermen rules.
Alderwoman from the 10th, you're recognized on the first reading of resolution number 1.
Turn your mic on.
Still not on. I think, Alderwoman, I think the mic needs to be turned on.
You have to turn it on. Press the button.
No, it's still red.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move that we adopt resolution number 1.
First, you need to request unanimous consent.
And I would like to request unanimous consent.
There's been an objection. Alderwoman, would you like to request suspension of the rules?
Yes, I request suspension of the rules.
It has been moved by the Alderwoman from the 10th, seconded by the Alderman from the 14th, that we suspend the rules for the purposes of introducing resolution number 1. This is a non-debatable motion. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Cone. Alderman Ryan. Alderman Balmer. Alderwoman Velazquez. Alderwoman Sanye. Alderwoman Spencer.
Aye.
Alderman Browning. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Aldridge. President Green.
Aye.
Alderman Cone. 13 aye votes and 1 no vote.
By your vote, you sustain the motion from the Alderwoman from the 10th. Alderwoman, you may. Now you can ask for adoption.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move that we adopt resolution number 1.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 10th, seconded by the Alderman from the 14th, that we adopt resolution number 1. Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President. This is, of course, resolution number 1 that we pass every year with our rules. I'll be open to any questions. All right.
Alderwoman from the 7th, you're recognized on amendment number 1 to resolution number 1.
Thank you, Madam President. Board, I would like to make a motion that we amend resolution number 1. Adopt amendment 1 to resolution 1.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 7th, seconded by the Alderman from the 14th, that we adopt amendment number 1 to resolution number 1. Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President. Board, Amendment 1 is something that I know almost all of us have dealt with on many of our committees. When we send out committee substitutes and floor substitutes and things of that nature, we're able to email it to our colleagues, but it's a lot of times a frustration to the public and our constituents at home because they can't see it until it's actually adopted in committee. And so the point of this rule proposal that I'm suggesting is that the moment that the clerk sends it out to the chair and the committee, that it is updated on the website, but it will say not adopted so that the public knows it still needs to be reflected. But that way our community can come in to testify and be testifying with the most updated version of the bill. And I think it will help all of us as well to take votes on things that we know that the public has had a chance to see, and it will help us to be, more transparent and more accountable to our community.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 12th.
President, members of the board, I don't have any questions. I don't have any questions of the sponsor of the amendment, but I will have to say that a committee substitute does not have to be a committee substitute comes to the committee. A committee substitute could be something that happens within the committee, at which point I don't have any objection to what you're doing, but you won't be able to have it because it'll be in real time, and they substitute it there, and that's why it comes out as a committee substitute. So you will not always get what you're looking for because it will be done in committee. That's all I want. So people will not expect that everything will be done, because if the committee does it right then and there, it still will be a committee substitute, but it will not be available. So people need to know that.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 10th.
I just wanted to make sure that the public knows that this also affords them the opportunity to see it prior to the hearing, which is what we as alders continue to hear in committee when we were in there trying to do the work in the most transparent and inclusive way. Thank you for this amendment, because I know that, again, we all dealt with this in committee hearings this year during this session, and we all want to work towards involving the public as much as we can, and we know that in committee, that is where they can be heard. And so having them being ready for committee, right, and not showing up to the committee and not knowing what's going to happen, being prepared and being able to then offer their amendments that we can work as alders and legislate in committee to make the changes that they would want to make, it just empowers them even more. So thank you for this amendment.
Thank you.
Alderman from the 14th.
My mic's not on. Okay. Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I also just want to thank the Alderwoman from the 7th to bring this up and echo what the Alderwoman from the 10th had said. A lot of times when we do, I think the rule, and maybe it's in the new one, is 36, 38 hours. If you have a committee sub, you have to submit it to the clerk ahead of time, but it is not usually online until the committee actually adopts it. So just in my time of actually going to committee and showing up over this last years, when I've submitted committee subs or other board bills that have been submitted with a committee sub, the community always say, I was ready to talk on the bill, but now there's a committee sub, and I don't even know what the committee sub actually says, so I don't know if I have an opinion on it. So I think this is just another way to be transparent and to let our people and residents and people who want to come testify actually have information on the committee sub that, per the rules, only way you could do a committee sub is you have to submit it 38 or 36 hours beforehand. Now, if you add amendments on the bill, that is during the process of the committee, or if you do a floor sub, that's during the process of the floor. But committee subs, per our rules, have to be submitted beforehand, and since it's submitted beforehand, the community actually don't get to see that. So this would allow them to be able to see that. So I appreciate your amendment on this for more transparency.
Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 12th.
Madam President, members of the board, I will say again, this got passed by Jeffrey Boyd, 22nd Ward Alderman, several years ago because he said he got irritated with people coming in at the last minute with committee subs. I voted for it. At that point, Tom Villa, who was then the 11th Ward Alderman, got on my case. He was not there that day and said, why would you vote for something like that? Because, Ty, as you know, the directly way that they can go around it. He is absolutely right. You don't have to bring a committee sub. You can bring, if you are really trying to get at that issue, then you should limit the amount of amendments and at some point say that becomes a committee sub. Because I actually can come in and bring 15 amendments and it's not a committee sub. And so if you're going to try to get to the issue the correct way, because it never stopped one person who wanted to do amendments. They just did amendments instead of a committee sub. So if you do not address that, you will not get to what you are trying to get to. So that is what I am trying to explain to you. That is not doing what you wanted to do. So I'm done.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 7th, you're recognized to close.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Again, I love this time of session, and it's really refreshing. Last time this happened literally the same day that we got elected, and so it's very nice to come back and be able to propose rules according to the year that's happened. And I do serve on, I think, 7 committees, and in every committee I've been on, we've had this struggle, even with myself. Sometimes I have to email it to constituents, the version that I have, or send it to the organization. And so certainly this won't fix any problem, and I think we have more rule changes to make. But I couldn't say it better than Alderwoman Clark Hubbard said, is that this is really about helping us be transparent, allowing us to bring community with us. And again, that's whether someone supports or opposes the bill. We want everybody to be able to give comment on the relevant version of the bill, or in many ways, we're doing them a disservice in doing the conversation a disservice. And with that, I would just like to renew my motion. And just for some clarity, the way that this would work is it would say not adopted on the website, and if you ask Clerk Kennedy, he can show you where they will go until they are adopted, but it will be available on the website, and then once it is adopted, it will show up as normal as adopted. So the community will be able to know that we haven't yet adopted it, and they will also be able to have access to the, the clean, updated version of the bill once it is accepted by the committee.
Great. It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 7th, seconded by the Alderman 14th, that we adopt amendment number 1 to resolution number 1. All in favor signify by, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Aye. Alderman Oldenburg. Aye. Alderman Cone. Alderman Narayan. Aye. Alderman Valmer. Aye. Alderwoman Velasquez. Alderwoman Sanye. Aye. Alderwoman Spencer.
Aye.
Alderman Browning. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Aye.
Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Boyd. Aye. Alderman Aldridge. President Green.
Aye.
Alderman Cone.
Aye.
14 aye votes and 1 voted present.
By your vote, you sustain the motion from the Alderwoman from the 7th to adopt amendment number 1. Alderman from the 14th, you're recognized on amendment number 2 to resolution number 1.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move for the adoption of amendment 2 to resolution number 1.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 14th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we adopt Amendment number 2 to Resolution number 1. Alderman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. So in our rules, rule number 61, number 5, we're making some edits to it. So it was actually already proposed in our rules last year that development plans that is submitted from SLDC have to have various attachments. What I'm doing is with the goal of potentially, in my opinion, there are some things that need to be tweaked as we learned this last year, especially in HUD's committee with the ordinance that was passed the year prior to our rules last year. It was good intentions of certain attachments that need to be attached to the development from SLDC, but I do think some of the attachments that were listed that need to be attached may be a hindrance to the process moving forward. Particularly, there is one in that ordinance says there need to be a letter of support from unions and elected officials, and I know we recently just had a situation where letters of support from elected officials got folks in trouble, and while I do support the union, we also want to make sure it doesn't look like a conflict or ethics by getting letters of support from unions who also potentially could be bidding on these projects. So what this amendment would do is just instead of stating that one ordinance, it would state the chapter of the development proposal where these attachments would need to go. Just yesterday we passed a board bill from Alderman Narayan, which doesn't have an ordinance number that would also be part of that attachment, but it would not be part of the rules because we're just referencing to an ordinance. So instead of referencing to one ordinance, we plan to reference to the chapter, understanding that there may be more changes around this process and making sure that it's transparent but not burdensome on all the people for trying to do development in their ward. And with that, I close. I left my earring.
All right. Alderwoman from the 12th.
Madam President, members of the board, if the Alderman of the 14th would yield.
The Alderman for the 14th yield to questioning from the Alderwoman from the 12th.
Absolutely.
And so, Alderman, I see that you struck out conflict of interest disclosure certification. Can you explain why that is being taken out?
So actually, I didn't strike that out. We got an email from the president's staff that was part of already a change added, so we kept that in. So the conflict of interest disclosure was actually an error that was made when we passed the rules last year that says those attachments, the way that it was written, that Lewis, our clerk, just sent out that we all have to fill out every year, have to be part of the development. But the ordinance actually doesn't say it have to be part of every development. So it was a clerical error on the rules that was made last year. So we're cleaning that up as well as attaching just the chapter.
So the conflict of interest that you're talking about, it's a disclosure that we have to file by every May. That's what you're talking about.
Yes, ma'am. And the way that it was written is that conflict of interest disclosure from the previous rules that we passed last year would have had to been on every development attachment, and that is not how that ordinance was written. It was just written that we have to fill out that conflict of interest disclosure certification.
So then you were getting at the conflict of interest with aldermen. You weren't getting at any of the conflict of interest that we have with these developers in this particular rule that we have.
Well, yes, correct. The conflict of interest with the developers is still part of that ordinance, so we still have to fill it out. But yes, ma'am, I was getting to the conflict of interest that we may have as alders, especially is it stating that ordinance a letter of support from unions? Maybe that's a union that have endorsed our campaign, given us money. And then it also says like a letter of support from an alder, which we just seen how that was problematic. So all that being said, there's some cleanup that needs to be done to that ordinance. So instead of citing the ordinance, I think it's more important to cite the chapter of the Muni Code that talks about different attachments as changes be made to that ordinance.
So then I'm getting confused again. So I know in May, the state requires us to file a personal disclosure, okay?
Correct.
And we have to file that personal disclosure, which talks about if you have certain things and you have to file it every year with
Correct.
the clerk, okay?
Yes.
And you also have to file it with the state, okay?
Yes.
But that doesn't get into a lot of things about, because you don't know what you're going to be sponsoring at that time. So that doesn't get to if you have a disclosure afterwards. That has always been in our rules to say that if you had a conflict after that, that you had to disclose it on the floor of the Board of Aldermen, which most people didn't do. And you also had to write it up something written and file it with the clerk, okay?
So we still have that process. We have to disclose it. In the ordinance, it is already in there that we still have to do that conflict of interest disclosure form, that what you're talking about. But what had happened last year when we passed it, it was written, as you see on this last one we're striking out, it was written in a way that would have to be attached to each development. And that was just a clerical error. We still have to fill out the conflict of interest disclosure, but it doesn't have to be part of each development packet that comes forward that would be in your.
Right, it wouldn't be in the package, but you still would be required to tell if this was a conflict. And so just what it used to be, but nobody ever did it, was that you were supposed to say it was a conflict. Even if you voted present, you were supposed to disclose it, and you were supposed to then file it with the clerk. So is that still going to be a process?
That still is going to be the process, and the email was out from Louis Galley that we all have to fill out today. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderman from the 3rd.
Thank you, Madam President. Just a point of clarification. So the form that Louis Galley sent out today is that personal financial disclosure form. That is not a conflict of interest form. So there's a separate conflict of interest form that is required underneath the charter that was passed by the voters with Prop R. And that requirement is that those conflict of interest disclosure forms are actually completed upon the filing of board bills. So this is something that I've repeatedly said, since the passage of Prop R. There's two separate forms that we're talking about, in this discussion right now. The personal financial disclosure form is just a snapshot in time of where your pecuniary interests are, where you derive income, what your ownership in certain companies or private properties might be, et cetera. What nonprofit boards you might be on, or what for-profit boards you might be on. It's not a conflict of interest statement. It is a simple snapshot in time of what your interests are. And so the personal financial disclosure isn't really pertinent to the rules. It doesn't get filed anywhere. But with Prop R, there is a conflict of interest form that is supposed to be filed with the clerk upon the bills being introduced, which most of us, are frankly, and I've said this before, it's not being done. So the conflict of interest form, it's completely separate than the forms we do every May that go to the clerk and the MEC. That's a completely different form. So there's a conflict of interest form that we are supposed to fill out upon the introduction of any board bills, whether it's a development board bill or any other board bill, where there might be, and it's very broad language, where there might be any type of perception even of a conflict with respect to personal or financial interests in a board bill. So, and to kind of further clarify, the personal financial statements that we file every May, those have nothing to do with our campaign, who donates to our campaign, none of that. That is our personal financial matters that have to be filed every May. It's not who our donors are. It's nothing of that nature. It's what our ownership and what our, any potential income might be that needs to be filed every May. The conflict of interest forms are to if there's a perception of personal or fiduciary interest in any matter that's pending before the Board of Aldermen. So those should be filed voluntarily by the alderperson who's sponsoring and or might be voting on any of those at any point in time. So just a point of clarification, I am supportive of the amendment, but just want to make sure that that clarification is out there.
Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 12th.
Madam President, members of the board, if the alderman from the 3rd would yield.
The alderman from the 3rd yield to questioning from the alderwoman from the 12th.
I will.
Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Alderman, so I want to make sure I heard you right, and maybe I misunderstood you. So the personal financial disclosures, which we have to file in May, they do have to be filed with the state, but they also have to be filed with the clerk. Is that what you say?
That's correct.
Okay, right.
That's correct.
And I know you and I have had conversations about the conflict of interest and the whole Proposition R because it's too broad. You can not necessarily know that you have a conflict because you may not have read a bill immediately. So you don't know there's a potential for a conflict until the last minute. I wrote many emails about how this was a bunch of malarkey. We really do have a lot of conflict of interest things in place. And so now the way we have it written, pretty much the minute somebody files a bill is what you're saying, this conflict of interest, we really should be running out there and reading it and see if we have a potential for conflict and then filing something. Is that not correct?
That's correct. Every single board bill that comes before the Board of Aldermen, we're supposed to review, according to Prop R and now in the city charter, we are supposed to read every single board bill that comes before us. And within, I believe it's 3 days of the filing of that board bill, not when it comes to a committee hearing, not when it comes up to a vote, but when it is filed, we have to, we're required to put in these conflict of interest disclosures. So, and that's irrespective of if it's a development incentive bill or any other bill. We have to read every single one of them. We have to be able to file these conflict of interest disclosures with every single one within the time period of them being filed, not for a vote.
And so you've been down here for a long time, as have I. Is there a real possibility that you could read every single board bill within 3 days and know if there's a potential of conflict?
Absolutely not.
In fact, you could be out of town when they get introduced, so you may not even know, or it's just something that may not come to your attention. So this is something that we passed, and it's part of our charter now, as I recall. Is that right?
That's correct.
But if we try to apply it the way it's supposed to be applied, we might as well just file a conflict of interest form for everything. That's the only way you could be in compliance with that. Isn't that correct?
To
Pretty
a degree,
much.
if there's the perception, yeah.
I'm just saying, unless you just say, for every bill, I'm filing one, just in case it's a potential, to do it in 3 days is almost physically impossible.
That's correct.
Okay.
And the form itself, I'm probably one of the few that have actually completed the form at this point in time. And I did so out of an abundance of caution. I don't believe there was actually a conflict that existed in that particular situation. And I think you know the instance that I'm referring to.
Because I told you I didn't think it either.
Yeah, so, but I think at the end of the day, that form specifically requires you to enumerate what your conflict is. And so you can't just do a blanket conflict for each board bill that comes forward, because you have to be able to specify what you believe the conflict or the perception of conflict might be on that form, which is going to differ from board bill to board bill.
And again, to how ridiculous that particular legislation is, because you cannot know all of that within 3 days. And some days you might have 10 board bills introduced or 5 board bills, and you may not see them or know that they're introduced or given to the clerk or whatever until a few days later. So that was a ridiculous thing, and that was also, to me, a smear on the board, as though we were unethical when we do have requirements for disclosure. And I think people pretty much, except for those who are purposely being criminal, try to live up to disclosing and not do conflicts. And so I thought that this was just an unnecessary thing, and that's what I was trying to find out when I was asking the Alderman from the 14th. It is your understanding that this conflict of interest then is that conflict of interest we have to file with the clerk on anything? Is that your understanding of this amendment? I can't hear you. Can't hear you.
Sorry. Yes, I can hear you. So that's correct. And that would be specific for the amendment that the Alderman from the 14th is introducing. My understanding is that this would be applicable for anything that would have a development report generated by SLDC. So that's, generally tax abatements or incentives. And, if there is the existence of a potential conflict, whether that's personal or like a personal matter or fiduciary matter, financial matter, then that conflict of interest report would be included in the development report from SLDC. But it's not, if there's no conflict, then there would be no conflict of interest form included in the packet.
So you said you actually filled out a form for something, and I know what it is. I don't want to bring it up because I don't think it was a conflict, and I told you that. But then, are you reading every single bill to find that out? I'm wondering how, we're going to put this in there and require this. How will this work? You're saying you're supporting this, so how do you see this working when you say that it's nearly impossible for us to fill those forms out?
So I think the idea here is that it would be the sponsor of the bill that would be not necessarily every alderperson that would be viewing it or voting on it. So the sponsor of the bill would have to include their conflict of interest statement with the filing of the bill.
Okay, but does it say that specifically as you understand it? Or is that just how you see it working in the real world?
I think that's actually how it would work in the real world, because the other 13 alderpersons plus the president likely aren't going to be reviewing those development board bills within the first 3 days of them being introduced or prior to the development report being generated by SLDC.
All right, thank you. I have no further questions.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Then it's been moved by the Alderman from the 14th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we adopt amendment number 2 to resolution number 1. There's been a request for roll call. Madam Clerk, please call the roll. There's been a request for previous roll. Hearing no objection, motion passes. Alderwoman from the 10th, you are recognized on resolution number 1 as amended.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move that we adopt resolution number 1 as amended.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 10th, seconded by the Alderman from the 14th, that we adopt resolution number 1 as amended. All those in favor signify by saying there's been a request for a roll call. There's been a request for previous roll. There's been an objection to previous roll. Madam Clerk, please call the roll. She just closed. Yes.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Cone. Alderman Narayan. Alderman Balmer. Alderwoman Velazquez. Alderwoman Sanye. Alderwoman Spencer.
Aye.
Alderman Browning. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Aldridge. President Green.
Aye.
Alderman Cone.
Aye.
Alderwoman Velazquez. Alderwoman Keys. 14 aye votes and 1 no vote.
By your vote, you sustain the motion from the Alderwoman from the 10th to adopt resolution number 1.
Resolution 2, sponsored by President Green and Alderwoman Sanye, hiring of the staff.
Alderwoman from the 7th, you're recognized on the first reading of resolution.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. This resolution is a requirement per our rules, Rule 16. It is about the hiring of our staff. Many of those folks are in the room right now. And then for those of us who have staff positions but haven't filled them, it's just left blank and says their ward number.
Would you like to request unanimous consent?
Yes, I would like to request unanimous consent for resolution number 2.
Hearing no objection, Alderwoman, you may proceed. Would you like to ask for adoption?
I would like to move for the adoption of resolution number 2.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 7th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 6th, that we adopt resolution number 2. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Resolution 3, sponsored by President Green and Alderman Aldridge, printing of the journal.
Alderman from the 14th, you're recognized on the first reading of resolution number 3.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move to adopt resolution number 3.
You need to request unanimous consent.
I request unanimous consent for number 3. I move for the adoption for resolution number.
You will have to suspend the rules
I move
since
to
there was an objection to unanimous consent.
I move to suspend the rules to introduce resolution number 3.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 14th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we suspend the rules for the purposes of introducing resolution number 3. This is a non-debatable motion. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Cone. Alderman Narayan. Alderman Balmer. Alderwoman Velazquez. Alderwoman Sanye. Alderwoman Spencer.
Aye.
Alderman Browning. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus.
No.
Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Aldridge.
Aye.
President Green.
Aye.
Alderman Cone.
Aye.
14 aye votes and 1 no vote.
By your vote, you sustain the motion from the Alderman from the 14th. Alderman, you are now recognized on the adoption of resolution 3.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move to adopt resolution number 3.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 14th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we adopt resolution number 3. Alderman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President. This is resolution number 3, the printing of the journal that we do every year. And with that, I close.
Alderwoman from the 12th.
Madam President, members of the board, I rise to oppose this motion because last year I said it, I've been trying for years. We waste paper printing up these journals. And I know that we have said that we have to address an issue concerning the charter, but the sooner the better. We need to change that because we can see these things online or other places, but to present them to us in paper that's just a waste of paper to me. I don't want to waste that paper, and that's why I'm voting no as an objection to that, and that we address that and stop wasting paper to print these journals, because I doubt very many of us read those actual journals all the time, so we need to stop that. So my no vote is not against, because I don't want for journals to be out there for people to read. We just don't need paper journals at this time. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderman for the 14th, you're recognized to close.
Thank you, Madam President, and members of the board. I renew my motion.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 14th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we adopt resolution number 3. There's been a request for roll call. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Cone.
Aye.
Alderman Narayan. Alderman Balmer. Alderwoman Velazquez. Alderwoman Sanye. Alderwoman Spencer.
Aye.
Alderman Browning. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus.
No.
Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Aldridge. President Green.
Aye.
14 aye votes and 1 no vote.
By your vote, you sustain the motion from the Alderman from the 14th to adopt resolution.
I'm sorry. Resolution number 4 sponsored by President Green and Alderman Cone, aldermanic and mailing expenses.
Alderman from the 3rd, you're recognized on the first reading of resolution number 4. Alderman, you're muted.
Thank you, Madam President. I ask for unanimous consent on resolution number 4.
Hearing no objection, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President. I would ask for everyone's favorable consideration on resolution number 4.
Would you like to move to adopt?
Oh, thank you. I would like to move to adopt resolution number 4.
Is there a second? It's been moved by the Alderman from the 3rd, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we adopt resolution number 4. Alderman, you may proceed.
I renew my motion, Madam President.
Alderwoman from the 12th.
Madam President, members of the board, I rise in opposition to this resolution, being that the only person who has a larger ward than mine is the 13th. The 200 stamps is what I got when I was originally the Alderwoman of the 20th, and I had 3 neighborhoods and a commercial area. I now have 12 neighborhoods. And so to give me the same amount of stamps is ridiculous, and it is not fair. It is not fair for the 13th ward. It's not fair for these larger wards. So to keep giving the same amount of stamps is to leave out a great portion. I actually represent what would be about 3 North St. Louis wards. I have all the old 20th, all the old 4th, part of the 21st, part of the 2nd, part of the 1st, and part of the 18th. So you could never even keep up with the kind of communications you had with people 30 years ago by doing 200 stamps. This is something that needs to be changed, and it needs to be looked at, the geographical area and the people that you have to reach out to. And so this would have been 600 stamps, because 200 would have gone to the 4th ward, 200 would have gone to the 20th ward, and the compiling of the other wards would have made a 3rd ward, and it would be 600 stamps. So I am opposed to it and will be voting no, because it is not a fair appropriation of what is needed in the larger wards. If I could just have the old 20th ward back, this would be fine. I don't have that in its entirety. I do have the old 20th ward, but it's leaving out a lot of people.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderman from the 3rd, you're recognized to close.
Thank you, Madam President. I just want to acknowledge that we're moving away from stamps themselves and going to more automated mailing, but do appreciate the comments from my colleague from the 12th. And I think that, we are looking to get to a place where we can have better constituent services and communications, and I would certainly take that under advisement, but would ask for everyone's favorable consideration on resolution number 4.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 3rd, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we adopt resolution number 4. There's been a request for roll call. Madam Clerk, please call the roll. And there's been a request for previous roll. Hearing no objection, motion passes.
Resolution 5, sponsored by President Green and Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Last day for introduction of board bills.
Alderwoman from the 10th, you're recognized in the first reading of resolution number 5.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move for unanimous consent for resolution number 5.
It's been moved by, hearing no objection to unanimous consent. Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President. I move to adopt resolution number 5 for the last day for introduction of board bills. This session, it'll be January 10th, 2025.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 10th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we adopt resolution number 5. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Resolution 6, sponsored by President Green and Alderman Vollmer. Conflict of interest disclosure.
Alderman from the 5th, you're recognized on the first reading of resolution number 6.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm sorry I was a little late. I was checking to make sure there was a conflict of interest for me handling this.
Appreciate your diligence.
I move that we adopt resolution number 6.
You need to request unanimous consent.
I don't want unanimous consent. I want somebody to just know.
There has been an objection to unanimous consent.
I object to it.
Would you like to request to suspend the rules?
Could we please suspend the rules?
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 5th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we suspend the rules for the purposes of adopting resolution number 6. This is a non-debatable motion. Madam Clerk, please call the roll. There's been an objection to previous roll. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Excuse me.
Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Excuse me.
Non-debatable.
This is
This is just on the
suspension of the rules, which is non-debatable.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Cone.
Aye.
Alderman Narayan. Alderman Balmer.
Aye.
Alderwoman Velazquez. Alderwoman Sanye. Alderwoman Spencer.
Aye.
Alderman Browning. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Aldridge. President Green.
Aye.
14 aye votes and 1 voted present.
By your vote, you sustain the motion from the Alderman from the 5th. Alderman from the 5th, you're now recognized on the adoption of Resolution 6.
I'm so excited. Thank you. This is basically the conflict of interest disclosure, which we do every year, which means don't be stupid. If you think you might have a conflict of interest, talk to legal, talk to anyone, but cover your butt and make sure you're doing the right thing. We've had enough problems down here in the past years. Let's all move forward. We've been doing very well. With that, I renew my motion.
Alderwoman from the 12th.
Madam President, members of the board, if the alderman from the 5th would yield.
Would the Alderman from the 5th yield to questioning from the Alderwoman from the 12th?
I'll yield for about 2 blocks, 3 blocks, and then I got to make a turn.
Okay, long as we end up in the Hill at your restaurant with you, right?
Okay.
Alderwoman, you may
Okay.
proceed.
So Alderman, this is the requirement that we have to file as a city so that we can file the conflict of interest without having to do some other things. Is that correct?
I believe that's my understanding of it, yes.
Okay, because if we didn't do this, then we would have to be filing different things.
Yes.
And we have to do this every year so
Yes.
that we can
That is
file
correct.
as a group, as one, with the conflict of interest, right?
That is correct.
All right, thank you. I have no further questions.
No, I'm not a lawyer. I just own a bar, but I think I know what I'm doing. Thanks.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? It's been moved by the Alderman from the 5th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we adopt resolution number 6. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Alderwoman from the 6th, you are recognized on the suspension of the rules for the purposes of introducing resolution number 8.
Can you all hear me?
Now we can.
I would like to suspend the rules to introduce resolution number 8.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 6th, seconded by the Alderman from the 14th, that we suspend the rules for the purposes of introducing resolution number 8. This is a non-debatable motion. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Cone.
Aye.
Alderman Narayan. Alderman Balmer. Alderwoman Velazquez.
Aye.
Alderwoman Sanye. Alderwoman Spencer.
Aye.
Did she say? I'm sorry, Alderwoman Spencer. Okay.
Aye.
Thank you. Alderman Browning. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Aldridge. President Green.
Aye.
15 aye votes.
By your vote, you sustain the motion of the Alderwoman from the 6th. Alderwoman from the 6th, you may now request unanimous consent on resolution number 8.
Thank you, Madam President. I request unanimous consent in adopting resolution 8.
Hearing no objection, Alderwoman, you may proceed with the adoption of resolution number 8.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, would you mind reading adoption resolution 8?
Resolution 8, a resolution reauthorizing the Special Committee on Reducing Red Tape. Whereas the Special Committee on Reducing Red Tape was first established in 2023 for the purpose of updating and streamlining licensing and inspection requirements at the City of St. Louis. Whereas this committee will work to reduce unnecessary laws and regulations that slow the growth of our local economy and identify burdensome red tape that makes it difficult to own, open, and operate a business in our city. Whereas the city's lack of sufficient personnel across departments, combined with onerous, outdated city permitting and licenses requirement, presents an immediate and urgent threat to equitable economic development and inclusive growth in the city of St. Louis. Whereas St. Louis restaurant owners report an understaffed excise department, a difficult and unpredictable application and public input process, lengthy wait times, and an inability to transfer a license to a new owner, among other issues. Whereas the Institute for Justice compared the local regulatory barriers across 20 cities in their February 2022 report, Barriers to Business for 5 different types of businesses. They found that 6,642 St. Louis was the 4th most expensive city to start a restaurant after San Francisco, Minneapolis, and Seattle. Whereas the St. Louis Live Convention Coalition reports an understaffed special event office, a difficult to navigate special events process, permits that require hand-drawn maps, and arbitrary and inconsistent fees. Whereas Mayor Tashara Jones established a new office of New Americans in 2023 to ensure St. Louis is more welcoming for refugees. Immigrants, entrepreneurs face additional barriers to establishing a business from language differences, less access to capital, and fewer personal connections to help them navigate local regulations. Whereas top priorities of the Special Committee on Reducing Red Tape are here to directly from various groups of business owners in the city about specific challenges they face, develop a one-stop shop for permitting, licensing, inspection processes, and enhance city technology to allow more process to take online. Now, therefore, let it be resolved by the Board of Aldermen of the City of St. Louis, reauthorizes the Special Committee on Reducing Red Tape for the purpose of updating and streamlining permitting, license, and inspection requirements at the City of St. Louis. The committee will continue to work to identify strategies to protect the investment of business owners and entrepreneurs, to reduce unnecessary laws and regulations that might be a barrier to the growth of local economy, to recommend other actions or policies that could improve and strengthen the city, and to perform other duties assigned by the chair of the special committee. The committee shall not extend past the Board of Aldermen 2024-2025 legislative session.
Thank you,
Introduced by the Honorable Daniela Velazquez, Alderwoman of the 6th Ward, and co-sponsors, President Megan Green, Board of Aldermen.
Alderwoman from the 6th, you are recognized on the adoption of resolution number 8.
Thank you. This committee did a lot of work this past session.
Would you like to make the motion?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to adopt Resolution 8.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 6th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we adopt resolution number 8. Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Thank you. Just want to say that this committee kicked off last session, obviously, and we were able to streamline parts of the liquor license process, but there's more red tape to be cut. So with that, I ask for this board's favorable consideration in adopting this resolution.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, it's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 6th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we adopt resolution number 8. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Alderman from the 14th, you are recognized on the suspension of the rules for the purposes of introducing resolution number 9.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move to suspend the rules to introduce resolution number 9.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 14th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we suspend the rules for the purposes of introducing resolution number 9. This is a non-debatable motion. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Cone. Alderman Narayan. Alderman Balmer. Alderwoman Velazquez. Aye. Alderwoman Sanye. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Browning. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Aye. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus. Aye. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Aldridge.
Aye.
President Green.
Aye.
Alderman Cone. Alderwoman Spencer. 13 aye votes.
By your vote, you sustain the motion of the Alderman from the 14th. You are now recognized on unanimous consent.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move for unanimous consent on resolution.
Hearing no objection, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President. Resolution number 9 is creating a
Would you
special...
like to ask for adoption now?
Thank you, Madam President. I move to adopt resolution number 9.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 14th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we adopt resolution 9.
Thank you, Madam President. Members of the board, resolution number 9 is setting up a special committee on our special taxing districts. Back in 2018 and 19, when former auditor Nicole Galloway was auditor, she did 2 audits on special taxing districts and community improvement districts, and she found various recommendations that we needed to be in compliance in with the city of St. Louis and on the state level. Of course, some of the ones on the state level that we can't do, but the ones on the city of St. Louis level we can. Again, the report was created in 2018 and 19, and the goal of this committee is to look at all our special taxing districts and community improvement districts to give recommendations so that we can come to compliance with what Auditor Nicole Galloway had put in her report years ago that said that we are out of compliance for our special taxing districts and community improvement districts.
Any further discussion? Alderman from the 2nd.
President, members of the board, will the Alderman from the 14th yield for a question, please?
The Alderman from the 14th yield to questioning from the Alderman for the 2nd.
Just for 2 of them.
Alderman, I asked you this earlier, but I want to expand upon it publicly. That is it the intention of this special committee that all future proposed special taxing districts would be referred to this committee as opposed to the HUDs?
No. So they would still go through HUDs. The point of this committee is to look at our current taxing districts and to really dive into, and I probably said that differently when I was talking with you. Maybe I didn't hear you, but our taxing districts still would go to HUDs. It would go to the committee that it's assigned to. The goal of this special committee is to really dive into the report from Nicole Galloway that was produced in 18 and 19 and figure out ways that we can make sure that our current taxing districts and our current community improvement districts will be in compliance.
Sounds like a more thorough audit, and because an audit is just a management tool. So this would really take those findings and address the after-the-fact established business districts to ensure that they remain in compliance with state law and local ordinance, correct?
Correct.
That's great. Thank you, Alderman.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderman, you're recognized to close.
Thank you, Madam President. Members of the board, I renew my motion on resolution number.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 14th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we adopt resolution number 9. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Second reading resolutions, committee reports and adoption.
We have none.
Courtesy resolutions.
We have none.
Miscellaneous and unfinished business.
Friday, April 26, 2024, full board meeting in the chambers at...
Miscellaneous and unfinished
I'm
business.
sorry, we have none.
Okay. We can dispense with line items 21 through 23. Announcements.
Friday, April 26, 2024, full board meeting in the chambers at 10 a.m. That's the extent of the announcements.
Any further announcements? Alderman from the 4th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. On Thursday, the 25th at 2 p.m., Public Safety will meet in the Kennedy Room. We're going to have Circuit Attorney Gabe Gore in to give a presentation on the work of his office. I want to extend an invitation to every alderman. He's going to give about a 30-minute presentation and then answer any questions that anyone may have. So it should be informative on his work over the last year or so. Thank you.
Any further announcements? Alderwoman from the 1st.
Thank you so much, Madam President, members of the board. I would like to first wish Alderman Cohn a very happy birthday. I feel very lucky to have served with him and to learn from him, and also to host a series of town halls. Next one is this coming Saturday at 12:30 p.m. at the Rondelet Library. Hope to see you all there. Thanks.
Any further announcements? Any further announcements? Seeing none, Alderwoman from the 10th, you are recognized on the motion to excuse.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. All members were present this morning.
Alderwoman from the 10th, you're recognized on the motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Madam President. Members of the board, I move that we adjourn until Friday, April 26, 2024 in the Board of Aldermen chambers.
There is a second. Nobody wants to leave. We can stay here until then. It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 10th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we adjourn Friday, April 26, 2024. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Motion carries. We are adjourned.